right, everybody, welcome back to another edition of the Liquid Weekly podcast. I'm your host, Carl Meisterheim, with my famous co-host, Taylor Page. Handsome as always, Taylor, good to see you. And today, we're excited to be joined by Sam Isseyegh, who's co-founder and app developer at Optizio. And we're going to talk all things today. Check out extensions, functions. It's going to be great. But before we get into that, Taylor, Sam, how are you? What's going on in life? Tell us something happening.
Oh man. So, well, at least for me, I'll go ahead and start so that way, give Sam an opportunity to think about his week a little bit. But so this past couple of weeks here, we're getting ready for Christmas, right? By the time this comes out, it'll be after kind of type thing. But we did the whole thing with the family. We do the whole go and get the Christmas tree thing. So growing up, we could never have real Christmas trees at home. For those of you that celebrate Christmas, you get the Christmas tree. My father was allergic to pine trees. And so we always got fake trees, kind of type thing. And so I never got to experience the joy that is going out, picking it out and cutting it down. So I do that now with my kids. We make it a whole thing. And so that's been a lot of fun being able to do that. It's obviously a lot more expensive doing it that way as well. But, just try to justify it with making memories and whatnot. So from kind of work related type stuff, also was pretty excited. Got to start kind of started this mastermind type thing. I don't know if y'all have heard of the concept kind of type thing. I always sound like I feel really weird saying it like mastermind. I always think of the kids cartoon Megamind whenever I think of it. But so I've started this with a couple of other Shopify devs just as a way to kind of collaborate, work together, kind of help each other out, talking about the things that are and aren't working and those sorts of things. So I've been really excited about that, just getting to learn from other people some more. And then gosh, this past week just had to put in a bunch of extra hours to get a project over the line. Got a bit on the burnt out, but I had a good long weekend to recharge. Finally took advantage of. I don't know if y'all doing this working for yourself sometimes, where you're like, oh, it's great because I can choose what my schedule looks like. You can choose who you work with. But then because of that, you feel this pressure to work all the time and you don't actually take the time off. I'm going to stop at 2:00 today and just play video games for a couple of hours or something in the middle of a work day. You feel kind of bad about that. But I talked to another person about that. They're like, no, you should totally do that. Get over it. It's fine. That's one of the benefits of working for yourself. So it was nice to take a little bit of time, recharge. So some things that have helped out with that I've incorporated recently, like bullet journaling and using a project management system called Basecamp, have been very helpful with just reorienting myself. And I find that whenever I'm getting overloaded, it's usually because I'm not taking the time to set that stuff up. So, back at it and doing all that fun stuff. So,
I just think it's ironic that you were talking about your love for cutting down trees, and I'm wearing my reforestation t-shirt. So I don't know, Taylor. I mean, how many trees are we cutting down here exactly?
Sorry, well, it's only one. How many trees do you get? That's just the one.
As many as you want, in theory.
I mean, but they're replanting the trees afterwards. I like this idea though of some places where you actually just get the whole tree and then replant somewhere else. I think that'd be really cool, but I don't know how that works. I'm not a scientist.
Well, we have the same plastic tree, for the last 20 years, more or less.
There you go, man.
My dad was careful with his money, so we still have the same tree.
That's awesome.
At least it's getting reused,
Yeah, right. You're not out there, killing trees like me. So
No.
What's going on with you, Sam? What's new in your life?
Other than putting up plastic trees.
Plastic trees. No, this week we've had kind of a chilled week at work. So we, my colleague Dave, who's my co-founder, we met up in London, had a big Christmas lunch, beers and burgers. Did some sort of project planning, wrote out the 2024 roadmap and we use Miro and Notion to sort of plan out what's coming next, really. So we had quite an easy week. I think things have died down a lot in the Shopify space. This is the week before everyone goes away on holiday. So yeah, pretty much just that on the work side. And then I'm heading off skiing to the Alps, the French Alps. First thing tomorrow morning, I've got a 5:30 a.m. train. And we're taking the train for the first time, actually. and I'm hoping it's a little bit better for the environment and it's a little bit more comfortable than flying and driving. But so sort of getting all the bits and bobs for that ready.
How long a train ride is it like? How long is that for you?
It's not that bad. It's I think it's roughly 10 hours total, including changing trains. We have to go from London to Paris, change train station, and then on to the Alps from there on a French train.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Quite excited for that.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, welcome.
Top going skiing on the friggin' Alps, Carl.
Yeah.
My getting a Christmas tree sounds so lame now.
You can come with.
I know.
All right, I'll be there.
I've got a lot of Eurocentric American things going on in my head right now, but that's really cool. I'm glad you could do that. I wish that we could actually go somewhere without driving our car. For me personally, life's been good. I've been working on some checkout extension stuff. I get an excuse to kind of dive into that, which is nice because my life has been a little code light recently, and I kind of miss problem solving, thinking through things. And the other big thing for me has just been the Liquid Weekly giveaway, the holiday giveaway. That idea came to me like a day before I wanted to start it, so I was scrambling to get everything pulled together, and I was so blessed to have so many people want to be part sponsor. Gadget and Ann and Trudy and Harsh Deep and a bunch of other folks jumped in, and so I'm really excited for folks to take advantage of that and win some awesome prizes this season. So see how that all sorts out halfway through.
Very cool. Very cool.
Awesome. And by the time this episode comes out, probably long over. But hey, if next time, pay attention and you can get a chance to do it.
Well, yeah, do multiple giveaways because this one's going to go so good.
Yeah, that's right.
There's a lot of really cool stuff in there for a lot of devs too. Just getting some one-on-one time with any of those people really would be huge. So very, very excited for those.
All right, well, enough of the jibber jabber. I know we're all excited to really get to the meat of today's talk because we got lots of questions on lots of interesting things to learn, I'm sure. So, Sam, before we jump into the deep stuff, just give us a quick 10,000-foot view of how you got into development and specifically how you ended up niching down Shopify, the Aptizio origin story, all that kind of stuff. We'd love to hear your context.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I've got quite a long story, sadly. So how did I get into development? I used to play a video game called Age of Empires that maybe you guys have heard of. I don't know. When we were growing up, that was the cool thing to do. And so I remember building websites for that. That was sort of my first intro into web development. And when I say that, with air quotes, that was sort of GeoCities time, if you remember the drag and drop editors and that sort of thing. So it goes way back there. And then I actually studied geography at university. So I don't know, computer science wasn't really a thing that you were pushed to do. At least in the school I was at, it was, I didn't even know it existed, to be honest. I would have loved to have done it in hindsight, but I didn't study computer science at university. I studied geography and environmental economics. And actually straight out of university, I started a startup called Outingly, which attempted to sort of digitalize real life events. And that sort of went well and then very badly. And sort of started software engineering roles, over the next while. So I've worked at many very, very, very big enterprise companies, doing mainly back-end work, sometimes with really old systems, JD Edwards, if anyone, the sort of green screen computing.
Wow.
Been lucky enough to toy with Internet of Things projects, sort of like Amazon Locker style things at Pebble Code, which doesn't exist anymore, sadly, but that was a very cool company. And then sort of have jumped between sort of front end, back end infrastructure sort of stuff. I met my co-founder Dave and our previous co-founder also Dave when we were working for Pizza Hut. So we helped to build their e-commerce platform that's used all around the world, and it sort of connects with many different point of sale systems. So yeah, I really did a bit of everything. So I think the term sort of full stack developer is maybe not so cool anymore, but I did whatever people told me to do, basically.
Yeah.
And yeah, so eventually, so 3.5 years ago now, we decided to start Optizio. That was sort of we wanted to do innovative things, so we wanted to essentially be a consultancy to solve optimization problems. So where you talk about you have $100 million and you need to pick your fantasy football team, how do you pick the best options and sort of deal with those sorts of problems. And that landed us to, okay, how do we do the stuff that we want to do? We need to make money, to feed ourselves. And we fell into the Shopify world that way and built our first app called Stackable Discounts. And about a year ago now, roughly a year ago, we built Discount Kit, our second app, which was built because the environment changed, the ecosystem changed. And, we learned a lot over 3 years, and sometimes it's better to start from the beginning than pivoting something. I don't want to say legacy because it was still quite new, but, sometimes it's the better of two evils, to just start again and start afresh.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's awesome. What a journey. And I didn't realize Pizza Hut was a thing in the UK. I was just showing my kids pictures of like the 1980s era Pizza Huts that I remember as a kid here in the US. And
yeah, it's still quite popular here as a restaurant. I think people don't really know that it does delivery. I think that was the whole thing they were advertising, like we deliver.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That's cool.
That's awesome. Huge pivot from working for something like Pizza Hut to like now we're working on we're building apps in Shopify and stuff like that. How did y'all find Shopify? It sounds like you were kind of working on this enterprise level, and then more so almost like scaled down to like a more of a direct to consumer kind of type model where you're doing this kind of type thing.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think at Pizza Hut, it was e-commerce driven, and there were some really cool things and processes that we had set up. So, you have the website and the orders flow through to the kitchen and the point of sale. I think we had sort of a very Slack ops heavy ops environment. So, every 5 minutes there was, this number of orders went through. Here's the experiments that we're running at these percentages, and this is the conversion rate, and this is the average order value, and this is the KPIs we care about. And so you were really pushed to, hey, come up with your own experiment, push it live to 5% of people, and see what the figures say. And so it was quite a good intro to e-commerce. It got you. It was fun. Like that. That's not legacy. That's it was a. I should say it's sort of. They call it Pizza Hut Digital Ventures, so it's like an internal startup type of thing, not the old sort of world. So we actually kind of thought we built this tool called Dealbot. I say we, I mean there's a whole team behind that.
Sure.
That sort of tried to bundle up products for you. So you put a pizza and a side and a drink into your cart, and it goes, hey, that's a bundle, that's 10% off.
Nice.
And it's
really handy.
Oh yeah, no, but I mean it. When you shop, if you always get the best deal, you build this trust with the site, with the shop. And so it did wonders for the conversion rate, that sort of thing. And so we were thinking, can we do something more generic for, every store? We were kind of, we had kind of some bad experiences, some good experiences. And we were looking around the internet. We said, Shopify, does some things in a completely different way. That's super interesting. It has a big ecosystem. There's such thing as a Shopify partner. Most other ecosystems didn't have that. So it was our first attempt really, and it went really, really well. I think we launched just before Black Friday without realizing the drama that would ensue, and I think we launched a proof of concept, right? So it had very little functionality, and pretty much every single shop that installed, and we were getting a lot of installs because stackable discounts back in the day, 3 years ago, back in the day,
it was huge.
was a highly searched keyword. And so we got a load of installs, and it pretty much didn't work for every single shop. And so we were, firefighting, how do we fix it for this specific theme and this specific merchant? And we pulled all-nighters for like 2 weeks, I think, to just get to survive without getting a 1-star review, That was tough. That was a tough intro, but we learned a lot, obviously.
Right.
Baptism by fire, for sure.
Yeah.
So in the Shopify space and app development, in some sense, app development's essentially been the same for a long time. There's been a lot of changes, but it's been relatively similar. But the paradigm shift seems to have come more recently with the introduction of checkout extensions, extensibility, and then also the introduction of functions. So I'd love to chat with you a little bit more about that. Let's kind of focus in first maybe on checkout extensions. How have you approach that in terms of your work? Where do you guys see opportunities there? What are some of the cool technical things you're learning as you push into that?
Yeah, I think there's a lot to go over on that just by itself. But I mean, it's a big change from the old world where as a Plus store you could edit your checkout.liquid, and these are currently Plus only features, really, the checkout extensions. So that is important to note. This isn't something new that every store gets just yet. But it is a very nice change from having to go in and look through sometimes quite massive checkout liquid files where there's
fight through someone else's JavaScript that they hacked together on checkout.
JavaScript with no processes or no tests, no structure. A bit like it's a bit like the Wild West, really. From a software engineering perspective, you have no idea who's been there before, and what happens when you touch this, and it's the checkout. The checkout is the most important part of the funnel. If you screw up the checkout, you've lost. You're throwing away money. You've convinced someone to buy by that point. So getting it right is important. So I think that's, for me, the most important thing is the sandboxing. So these checkout extensions, they're all sandboxed and they run in service workers or web workers. Sorry, and you can't mess things up as easily. I think it's very locked down. So there's they provide certain JavaScript APIs to you, so like fetch and some storage APIs, but you don't have access to the DOM. You can't manipulate the DOM. You can't do, arbitrary things. And I know that's upset certain people in the ecosystem, and maybe rightly so. It is a change in the way things are done. But I think overall it is a good thing. Now you can just write a React component, and the UI components are built for you. You don't have to be a fancy designer. You can just be a developer, and Shopify has built these incredible set of small Lego blocks for you to kind of add together and build your own experience. And then it integrates natively with the branding API. So it looks, your, how do you say, sort of the roundness on your buttons and the color scheme, you get all of that out the box, and you go, that's much better than writing arbitrary random JavaScript,
the consistency there, or I think one of the biggest selling points with checkout extensibility, in addition to that consistency, right, was we also now have access for that to like those customizations to reach like shop pay, which before like checkout.liquid, that was a big thing I found out when I was first working on Plus shops. And like, okay, great, like let's do this on checkout.liquid. Shop pay rolls out, and then they're like, well, hey, like none of these customizations we're doing are showing up here. I was like, yeah, it's not accessible that way. And so now it is, though. So that's a huge benefit. I don't know if you could speak maybe to that a little bit as far as the pros and cons of to check out extensibility. You mentioned this too. I've seen a lot of like pushback also from other app devs in the space who are basically like, hey, like this really is a step back kind of type thing. And I think, in some areas, yes, but is there anything that you've seen that's really been a step backwards, outside of some of these like little things as far as, oh, well, like now we can't manipulate the DOM the way that we used to kind of type thing or whatever? Are there other like significant, I don't know, are there other significant changes with updating, migrating from checkout.liquid to checkout extensibility that you've noticed?
I I don't think I've personally, or like our team has personally run into any of those big blockers. I think I think we did consult from a very high level with someone who wanted like a map component in there, and I think they actually released that already. So I think the team's pretty on the ball. They have the foundation of remote UI, which was released, and it's used by not only Shopify, it's used by Stripe as well to do their injections of outside components. I haven't really, to be honest. A lot of it is just time. I think you're always going to get, like you say, my specific scenario is not possible anymore.
Right.
I think,
people that didn't update, to support checkout extensibility, kind of type thing that are now mad about they haven't been on the ball with that or whatever.
I haven't run into that, so I'm not angry, but
yeah, exactly.
If I had, I would probably have a different opinion,
Have you had, and I don't know, I'll have to link this up in the GitHub repo, because I've run into this where especially around Black Friday, we were trying to run some automatic discounts, right? Kind of type thing or whatever, and running in discounts. Yeah. Have you had that as a feature request where we could hide like the current like discount input at checkout? I don't know if you've heard that from merchants, mainly because of like how it interacts with, hey, like our automatic discount, we just don't want them to be able to add discounts at all at checkout, kind of type thing, So I don't know if there's an open GitHub issue on it for that to be added to checkout extensibility as an option, but right now it's not, and we used to be able to do that with checkout.liquid. So
so there are little things, like we said. I think it almost, and I can't remember specifically on the discount field, but yes, the answer is many merchants have asked us that over the last 3.5 years.
You've probably run into that a lot.
Oh yeah, because especially with Stackable, because Stackable allowed you to add a discount code and it would change the rules of how it was applied. So there was a cart or cart slider input field that we would add, and then you had this awkwardness where you had another one at checkout, and actually I believe Plus stores used to be able to like toggle it off, and then I believe it also doesn't show if you don't have any manual codes by default. So
correct, yeah.
I think there are some caveats around that, and yeah, that's definitely come up many times in but I feel like that's not a new problem. That's like a problem that's been there for
without some manipulation you couldn't. But now at the moment, checkout extensibility, there's no way to touch it, because like you said, like we can't manipulate the DOM the way that we used to, kind of type thing.
Right, and I think that's the kind of thing that it would be nice, for Shopify just to add an option, and keep it as simple as that. It should just be a setting, and this is my personal opinion, right? Things like that should be settings, natively.
Agreed.
And they shouldn't be DOM manipulations by random developers. Just my opinion.
No.
I think at that point, it's as simple as allow people to toggle it off or not.
Right. Yep. Move away from that wild west of checkout.liquid. We just need this should just be a setting.
Yeah. I think
100%.
There's this difference between functions and checkout extensibility as well, because they're two different things really. But
did you want to go over maybe the high level, the differences as far as, because I get that question a lot as far as when are we reaching for like an extension? What are functions? Because we're having to migrate stuff either way, like in any of these instances, right, where we were doing stuff in checkout. So I don't know if you can talk a little bit about that, or maybe some things that y'all have found where this is actually better. We can get away with some things in extensions instead of checkout functions or whatever.
Right. Yeah, I think there's one example that comes to mind, which is blocking checkout codes, discount codes at checkout. So with old scripts, I believe you could actually block a specific discount code from being added, and also write a custom message, for example. I think that's quite a desired feature. But then you look at, if functions are the replacement of scripts, but you can't do that in functions, where do you do that? And I think the answer is likely, can you do something like build your own discount input field that you have full control over, to a degree, it's a React component, and then can you hide the other discount entry field, which links the two problems together. Obviously, it's a little bit
right.
But it's sort of like to get for functionality, you kind of need both. The functions don't work full stop unless you're on the new checkout, regardless. So you need to have upgraded, but you can use scripts, in both worlds. So just to add more complexity,
Yeah. And that's what you're saying. We're safe to use. We can have upgraded checkout or be on checkout.liquid and still use scripts. We're safe there or whatever. But functions, you have to have migrated at that point.
That's right. Yeah. Exactly. And yeah, I mean, functions is great because really functions looks like, or sorry, it is scripts v2. So there's a lot of people saying, why are you taking scripts away? Scripts v2 is functions, so they're not taking it away, they're just changing. And if you look at the functionality, you can already see there's way more functionality in functions than there is in scripts. It's just removed really loved features, I guess. Which is
well, can you give an example? What do you mean by there's more functionality with functions than what are things that we can do with functions that we couldn't do with scripts before?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm probably going to say something silly, but I think the cart transform API is a great example.
Good. I'm glad you're bringing that up because I've seen people talk about it and I need to read up on it, and I'm like, I need somebody to explain to me what's happening here because it seems like there's a lot of cool stuff in there.
I think I'm more excited for the future of cart transforms personally. What they add to it eventually. So one example of a missing feature with the upgrade was the ability to change the price of a cart line to a specific price. So you could do that in scripts, line item scripts with, I believe that was one of the functions available to you.
Okay.
You can't do that necessarily in a function, a discount function specifically. You could dynamically calculate the amount you want to discount each line and do it that way. That would work. There are some other caveats there that I won't go into right this second. But yeah, it's the kind of thing where it used to be there and now it's not. And then they've just released a new cart transform called Update, which is now developer preview. So it's not live in production yet, where you can update the cart line directly. And so instead of doing it with a discount function, which would have been most people's first thought of where you would do that or where you would have that functionality, it's now a cart transform called Update. And you can update a specific cart line and you can update the price and the title and the description. So yeah, there is definitely this world where functionality doesn't feel like it's in the same place, but it is there, and it is it will eventually surpass those types. So the expand and the merge functionality and the new bundles APIs, and they've even added storefront functionality there with the line items. I forget how you say it, how they've called it in the API, but you get sort of what's in a line, what are the line parts. That's the one. So you can build really nice user experiences with Liquid that directly link up with your function, right? Which is something really cool, I think. So there's definitely a bigger story there. There's also stuff like that I've seen order routing. With that, I don't think existed before, which I think is a very specific plus focused functionality or feature for big stores. Like I think Unilever, that might have many big stores around the world, and they have different warehouses and things like that, and so it improves their sort of experience. I think there's the cart valid. Sorry, I'm talking a lot, guys. I'm sorry.
No. You're saying good stuff. So
there's the cart validation stuff is also really good, and again, that sort of interacts really nicely with the UI in checkout. So you can put a message in it, and it shows there. So I think there's stuff that feels better integrated. It might be less functionality at the time being, but I think you'll look back on it and it will be, oh, this is so much better, 1 year down the line.
So Sam, I have two questions for you. One comment, first of all. My first comment is, I really wish they'd made it possible to do this in Ruby, not just JavaScript. Because
I was waiting for you to start ragging on it being in JavaScript.
No, I'm not ragging on it. I enjoyed it because there was really no other Ruby outlet in the theme sort of line space. So anyway, my two questions were this. One is, one of the things that's really bothered me sometimes about line item scripts is the properties that are or are not available on the different objects that you can interact with, like line items, variants, products, and things like that. Just certain fields that feel like that would be obvious to have this in here, just aren't in there. In functions, what have you found to be the case? Do you have access to a lot more of the properties and data on line items and products and variants and things, or is there still some weird limitations on what you can find in there?
Really good questions. I think I'll answer the second one first. So the way that it works in the functions world, and all of the functions are similar, not exactly the same, is you start with a GraphQL schema. Instead of just, here's some documentation about what you get and you have access to it directly, here's this huge schema of information, which you can interact with as a GraphQL API. So you have the whole API available to you, and then what you do is you write a query on that schema, or against that schema, and you basically say what information you want. So I want the product ID, but I also want the variant description or whatever it might be. And that allows you to keep the data that comes into your function really, really limited, whilst giving you a lot of power. There are limitations in terms of, and this is, I think classic Shopify, where they've done quite a complicated rate limiting in the admin API with the leaky bucket algorithms and stuff. They've again got, you can create a GraphQL query worth this number of points, the damn points, and each piece of data you ask for is worth a point or something like that. And then some pieces of data are more expensive than others, sort of
That's
nested
fun.
information. And that's really great. And the second part to that is you have this great feature called input variables. So you don't have to just statically write this input GraphQL query. You can pass it information, for example, a list of collections that you want to check if line items are a part of. So, if you query a product, you have this cool GraphQL function you can have. It would, is in collection. You kind of have similar features, but you need to dynamically pass, that list of collections. So you have sort of a way to pass arguments to the GraphQL query to really narrow it down as well. So I think there's a lot of, it's different. It's not the same, but you can get a lot of information. You also have access to Metafields on pretty much every resource, including the shop resource, nice. Which means, technically you can put any data you want in there and access it, nice. Which is way more powerful than what you had before, which was cart attributes, which was, then you're getting into stringifying objects, and then, I don't even want to talk about
that. I'd be really interested to hear a little bit more too, and I think we had this as a question with passing. You're talking about like accessing data and stuff like that, but as far as like passing settings and configuration back and forth, using stuff like meta objects or something like that, or Metafields or whatever. I don't know if you can talk about maybe benefits of that, as well to some degree, or maybe how y'all are leveraging that, because there's a real push right now, even on Shopify's end, right, where they want app devs to be using meta objects like essentially as their database, right? Like let that be like where you're hosting all your data kind of type thing, or whatever kind of type thing. So is that something y'all have explored, or do you have any like input there as far as maybe how folks could start looking at doing that within their own app?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. So the main way to pass configuration to functions is through Metafields, actually. So generally a function, and this is not true for all functions yet, but I believe they will all be like this. They all have an owner resource type. So, if you run a discount function, there's a discount node, and that discount node is the owner of the function. I forget a payment customization and these types of things, what their owner is, but there is always an owner, and that owner can have a metafield associated with it. And so normally you would set up the configuration. So when you write a function, the way I've liked to describe it before is you can think of it like a class. I personally hate object-oriented programming, but if you think of it like a class, and you describe, when you create a function, you describe, the interface for it. You say what data can come in, what the output's going to be. And then when you actually go and using discounts or payment customizations, when you actually go and create one, you're kind of creating an instance of that class, right? Of that function type, your new unique creation. And how do you pass, the individual configuration to each of those instances? So if I create, in discount kit, for example, we have an order goal discount, which is a tiered discount based on the order subtotal. So it's quite simple. But the configuration when you create one of those is, tier 1, you need to hit this amount of money and you get this percentage off. So all of that data lives on the metafield of the discount node, so they can kind of live together. Now, it's a really interesting point you make, because, what we also want to do is show that data on the front end, on the storefront. So we have a little message that says, hey, if you spend, $20 more, you get 10% off your basket, and you want to gamify it and do that sort of thing. And that's where it gets interesting, because if what you did instead, and this is not something we currently do, we do it in a different way, but I'll simplify. If you, instead of storing the configuration on the discount node in this example, you stored it on the shop resource, you now have access to that in Liquid. And so you can read the discount configuration or the payment customization or whatever it might be in Liquid directly, at compile time of the theme. So like on the server, right? So so it's a much nicer way to interact with data. So yes, and the way that you do the input variables actually is also in the function configuration. You specify the key in the namespace of a metafield that you're going to pass that data into. So it is very based. Metafields are important. That's how it works actually. And yeah, I think it's a great thing. There are pain points around that as well, but like always, there are always pain points.
Right.
So it feels like this world is fairly complex for folks that aren't already familiar with it, and a lot of things that are being added and changed and getting into developer preview and graduating everything. Where is your sort of go-to source for the most up-to-date information about what's actually available and documentation-wise?
Yeah, I mean, you guys have been around a while. I mean, the documentation for Shopify has just got so much better in the last 3 years. Like, you can't even describe the difference. I think the documentations for functions especially is really, really good. So Shopify.dev is my go-to. So if you go to the function APIs part of the dev site, you'll kind of get all of the function types that exist. And then within that, you kind of have you have a GraphQL interface and then also an overview. The overview kind of describes what the limitations are, what it actually replaced. So normally those questions are actually answered. In line item scripts, I used to be able to split the lines of a specific line into 2 lines, for example, and then discount only one of them. How do you do that now in functions? It kind of describes, you would use a discount function, and if the discount amount is different on the 2 lines, Shopify will split them for you, for example. So that's all kind of available in the overview docs. And then the GraphQL reference is obviously important for seeing what input you have. I think this is where having a typed language, or using TypeScript for functions or Rust for functions is really useful, because actually, I mean, I do look at the documentation site, absolutely. But a lot of the time, if you're just kind of noodling around, if you just click dot and then you get, what's next, and you get the type of it, it's a really good way to explore the documentation. So I'd say the type definitions that are available they have two actual sub packages. So they have function Rust. Don't quote me on the names, and function JavaScript. And they're both like helper packages, really. Mm-hmm. The Rust one, for example, comes with like a GraphQL client that looks at your schema and your query and auto generates the types for you, which is lovely, because now you have the full API typed in code. Again, there are negatives with that as well, but you get the same thing with TypeScript. Out the box with the starter kit, you get an npm or yarn type gen command that looks at your input query and it looks at the schema and it automatically creates the TypeScript types for you. And so, it's kind of a chicken and an egg problem, because to get the types, you need to touch the query. So you do need to look at the doc. But I mean, sort of a week later or further down the line, you don't really need to even go to the docs. You can kind of just click through and see what the types are.
Well, that was what I was going to ask you. Yeah. So you're talking about like how helpful the docs are, but it sounds like, which I'm primarily a front end guy kind of type thing, but anytime I'm touching anything back end GraphQL related, that seems like most people's recommendation is like, just start poking around, in the Explorer or whatever kind of type thing. And that seems to be the best way to kind of surface what you're needing, do you think that's pretty accurate?
Yeah, I think so. I think in this case, you do really need the docs to actually see, sure. the input is small, right? Relative. It's nowhere near the size of like the admin API, which has, thousands of resources. This is, you have an input, which is generally the cart, the identity of someone, the localization. So what market are you in? You get access to all this information. You choose what you want. I think you need the documentation to come up with the query, and then from then on you can kind of explore. But like if you use TypeScript, for example, they don't just give you, it might be there or it might not be there. They give you it like properly typed, so they have a maybe type, for example, so you can actually like really understand what's going on. So it's really like the TypeScript definitions are really well typed, for example.
Nice. Well, and I think this is kind of pertaining to both extensions and functions here, and I'm not sure what Carl's been digging into with checkout extensions, but most of the checkout extensions that I've been writing have been for folks I'm working with one-on-one that are Plus brands. So with that, we have this option where we can do extensions only, checkout extensions, right? So it's just hosted directly by Shopify. And so, we're building some settings in, at checkout or whatever, where they can add different things or whatever kind of type things. And so I've experimented a little bit with using meta objects then for us to like surface, different little things that we need to do. But with functions, I mean, those aren't hosted at all by Shopify. We don't have that option, right? It's not like we weren't running, excuse me, like with Shopify scripts, we're doing all of that within Shopify. But if we're talking about functions, like you're having to go hosting on your own completely, aren't you?
That's a good question. I think there is an important, distinction between the two worlds. Like, you're completely right. I think I think they call it Atlas hosting of checkout extensions is really cool. And if I'm completely honest, I don't know exactly what can be a headless extension or not.
Because you're building public apps, so it's not like you're not having to dig into the minutia there of that. But I don't think there is. That's what I'm saying. I don't think there is a way to host functions directly through Shopify. I think you have to go an app route.
Potentially a custom app. I don't know the answer to that, honestly. So I won't say the wrong thing. I think regardless, it probably will be coming anyway. So like we have done custom functions for people for Plus stores for different merchants, and the way we've tended to do that is either through one of our existing apps, so like Discount Kit or Stackable, and we just
Sure.
deploy, a hidden discount function if it's a discount function. But you could technically still do this. So, for example, you create a custom app, and I hope the answer isn't like that you can do it. Then this sounds silly, but you could create like a custom app, and
Sure.
you can create the functions programmatically with GraphQL. So you don't really need to go through the whole building an app and for there to be a page. So we have done discount functions that just have the configuration as code, for example. And so you can set up, a GitHub action or something to continuously deploy that, and you've got your function, which is exactly how scripts work, right? You have your code, and you have a nice GUI or editor to do it, but you could just write things locally in your development environment with all the tools that you like, and then push it up to GitHub, and then you have source control and auditability and all of these other really lovely things that Git gives you. So yeah, again, it's sort of, there are pros and cons and trade-offs, but you can technically do it without building a UI and without building an app, and we have done that for some people. I think there's an interesting thing here, which is for checkout extensions, for example, specifically. You have the settings in the app.toml or the extension.toml, sorry.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so you can kind of feed data in from that settings, and you get the UI built for you, right? So you can say, I want a piece of text, and the merchant or a marketing member of their team might change that text over time, and your React component can use that data straight away. So It is really powerful. With discount functions as an example, just because that's what we write every day at Discount Kit. It's a little bit more complicated, because if you want it to be written as code, you can write the configuration as code. There's no problem with that. There's nothing wrong inherently with that. But if you want, say, your marketing team to be able to go and change the tiers at a later date, then you do need a UI. And so you need some sort of app bridge UI. My gut feeling is what will eventually happen, if it's not already being built by Shopify, is they will have some sort of, you specify the settings in a TOML file, and they build out, a UI for it. Because that's what kind of makes sense. That's what I would do, in their situation. So if we're thinking about it a year after they've started this thing, they've definitely thought of all this stuff.
They've definitely. So and that's good. I like learned something there, obviously, because I've just been telling people, functions, like, we need to go, we need to get an app, that's that, or like we're building something custom or whatever. But so you're saying basically there is a way to do it now, but in general, I mean, I'm still gonna leave that up to people that really know their ways around functions. I'm not going to touch that or whatever. But you're saying basically it's possible. Probably down the road, something else is going to get built out, similar to what we're doing maybe with checkout extensions now for extensions only plus people. So that's awesome.
Oh yeah, I think there's also that's available to Plus stores again. So only Plus stores can create custom apps that have functions. So that's a specific limitation. Like, you can't have functions on a custom app for a non-Plus store. So it's interesting, because then you have the app side of things. So like Discount Kit, at Discount Kit, we just released the custom discount, and the purpose of that is to make something that's generic enough that, you don't have to go and write your own function, but it's not. I think there's a balance, because we tinkered with the idea of building our own script editor, because why not? It seems like a very obvious idea, but in reality, most people what they do when they write a Shopify function is they go and copy and paste an example and then tweak a few things, right? That's the reality of what people do, right?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
It's like people don't actually want to write the code and maintain it, and there's a cost to that. So we've tried to replicate how we thought about writing discount scripts and build it into a UI, and then you have an app, and there is a cost associated with that, and maybe it's a little bit more expensive than some other apps, but you have to weigh it up against are we going to pay a developer to look after this, or are we going to?
Well, that's what I was gonna say. Like, yeah, what you're gonna end up paying a dev, and so that doesn't make sense in a lot of use cases, and so yeah, for sure.
So yeah, we've tried to kind of go, okay, what do you do when you're writing a discount function? Like the first thing you do is you try and look through the cart lines and go, which are the specific products I care about, and so you have that sort of grouping of the cart lines part. So that's sort of step one, and then what's your algorithm that you want to do? Is it a buy X get Y up to a certain limit, or whatever that code you might write? So can you build a little GUI to handle that logical bit? And we've got pretty far with it, not all the way, but yeah, it's definitely possible. And yeah, if Shopify eventually releases some sort of way to create a form, essentially from configuration, which they kind of already do if you think about it with the app theme extensions and the checkout extensions. Yeah, it kind of feels like a no-brainer, and that will just happen eventually, and then your life will become easier, I suppose.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
So, Sam, I don't know if you can answer this question because I don't know your background, but are you a Rust developer at all?
Oh, yeah, that's tough. Yes, I think I would consider myself a Rust developer now.
Okay.
We built our backend for Stackable in Rust, so 3.5 years ago. But that was our first introduction to it. But we've been running Rust in production, for the last 3.5 years.
Well, but when writing functions for Discount Kit, we're not using Rust; we're using TypeScript.
Well, that's what I was about to ask him. I was just curious, like, since you were able to see both sides of it, when these first came out, it was Rust only. I think that was a big stumbling block for a lot of developers because Rust is still a little bit of a niche language for a lot of people. But now that you see both sides of it, do you see any reason to do the work to get up to speed with Rust if you're not already in that spot to do this work? Or do you think they're pretty much equivalent in terms of the benefits they bring to the extensions and functions?
That's a really good question. You guys are coming out with the good questions today. I've spoken about this with Dave, my co-founder, so much, because there is a massive benefit to writing everything in TypeScript or JavaScript if that's your flavor of choice. And the whole rest of your program is in that language. That's brilliant, because you can reuse code on the storefront, you can reuse code everywhere. So there's a real benefit to it. But like everything, there are trade-offs and pros and cons. And it's really interesting because, Rust is a statically typed compiled language, and JavaScript or TypeScript is dynamic, and you need some sort of interpretation of that, right? So they're two different things, and I'm not a compiler developer, so please take what I'm saying as like very high level things, but in Rust, for example, you can have generics, and I believe they call this monomorphization. I probably said that really wrong, but it's where you take like a generic function and you create many monomorphic instances of it. So imagine you had a function that could take a string or a number, instead of like what it would turn that into is a function, like two functions, that one that takes a string and one that takes a number. And so you get these massive performance gains, right? Because it's basically just a bunch of lookups, with like in comparison to like dynamically dispatching and however all these other things work. And so there's a trade-off. So you get way more performance, but you get a way bigger binary size. So, that one isn't better than the other. You might need to use Rust for the performance, right? So JavaScript as an untyped or dynamically typed language, I should say, it's really hard. It's not that you can't build compilers for dynamic languages. I believe there are examples of that being done. I'm not that aware of this stuff, but it's much harder if you don't have typing to build a native bundle, a native binary that is really actually performant. And so when you think of writing something that needs to go into a fast performant WASM file, JavaScript is not the first language that comes to mind, and you can see that in the results when you test this stuff. If you generate something with WASM and something with Rust and something in JavaScript, and I'll talk specifically about discounts as an example because we've done most of our testing there, where you normally care about the cart lines. So, how many cart lines are there? That's sort of the bounds of your algorithm. That's the thing that's going to make a difference. So if you have 100 cart lines or 200 cart lines, from my testing, most of the most simple algorithms that you could possibly write, the TypeScript or JavaScript one is handling, 20, 30 cart lines. The Rust one's handling, 100, 150, 200 if you write performant code. And so it really depends. I mean, like, how likely is it that a lot of customers have really big cart lines, carts? I mean, if it's B2B, it can be up to 500, right? Even the Rust functions probably would not be preferable there. So yeah, I think you got to be smart. And I think there's a difference here in the different function types that are available, right? So I'm saying this from the discount function, whereby your algorithm, whether it's a bytes get Y that you're trying to create or whatever it is, you take the cart lines as input and you do something. You probably have to iterate over them. So that's much more performance heavy than, say, a payment customization, which might just be a configuration, which doesn't care about the number of cart lines in most cases. It might, but in most cases, as an example. So in that case, you definitely should just use something like TypeScript if you don't write Rust or you don't understand Rust. There's no need. If you want to write something that deals with, large numbers of cart line items, you probably want to use Rust, right? And the other point is that it doesn't have to technically be Rust or JavaScript. That's just what Shopify supports out the box. You can write assembly script if you wanted. You can write Haskell if you wanted. You can write a lot of other languages that do have compilers into WASM, but again, they have these problems with the binary sizes tend to be really, really big. And actually, the JavaScript binary sizes are too big out the box. And what Shopify have done is really clever. They've written this essentially compiler called Javi that pulls out the runtime, the JavaScript runtime, and it's created like a WASM runtime that imports the JavaScript things that you would normally use. And so with Java, you can write a TypeScript function that's only 1 kilobyte or 2 kilobytes in comparison with the Rust one, which might be 200 kilobytes or 250 kilobytes. But then the performance, there's the performance impact. So there are geniuses working on this at Shopify. If you look at the code they've released on Java, for example, and they've also got one called Ruby, which is a Ruby to WASM compiler. So they might do.
I was gonna say, Carl's on board now.
My personal opinion is that's probably quite a long way away, and it looks more like a proof of concept. But I mean, if they could do it with JavaScript, they can probably do it with Ruby.
They can probably do it with Ruby.
Yeah, probably. And then Taylor's happy, and Carl's happy, and everyone's happy.
Everybody's happy, man.
I don't know if Taylor cares, but Carl's happy at least. Yeah. That's what this podcast is all about.
All my Ruby and Rails questions go to Carl. So as long as I've got JavaScript, then I can keep my questions to a minimum. So
oh, nice. I mean, Ruby was the first programming language I learned ever. So
really, that's awesome.
I used to love it. I used to really love it. I just never we
Carl.
built our first startup in it, and then I never used it after that. Really. So
yeah. It's one of many tools. I'll say that it's a good tool, but it's not the only thing out there.
Of course, yeah.
Nothing if not open-minded. Wow, that's great, Sam. That was a real nice deep dive, and I really appreciate the insight you provided there. Taylor, we're getting to that part. We probably need to transition, but I also want to give you the benefit of. Is there anything else you really need to dig into with Sam?
No, I think we spent a little bit of time touching on TypeScript. We didn't really dig too much into TypeScript versus JavaScript, and we did.
Sorry, harsh deep.
One listener submitted question. That really does have to be asked, because it does sound like you are a huge TypeScript fan, and it gets a little spicy between folks sometimes. So that is our one question that we wanted to make sure we asked on here was, when are you moving from TypeScript to the much superior language JavaScript? That was our question, and I asked it in the way that it was typed. So
yeah, nice. I mean, honestly, the truth is, I don't have anything spicy to say. The truth is, I don't really care. People have their preferences. They do. People have their preferences, and what you've programmed in for many years is going to be your preference. I totally get and respect that. So no hard feelings. I would say, having things typed when so using functions as the example, right? So if you started with JavaScript from scratch, you'd get the input variable into your function, and then what you're going to guess, what's available to you. And the truth is the answer is no, you won't have to guess, because you're probably using VS Code, and VS Code is running TypeScript under the hood, and it's giving you these squiggly lines and these type completions. And so, like, most people are probably using TypeScript, as a tool. It is a tool that is useful. So, I mean, you can use it or not use it. It's, personally, I feel a little bit naked when I write vanilla JavaScript now. It feels wrong. It feels dangerous. It feels dangerous. I mean, like, there's
I'm still on the Wild West side. I still stay pretty vanilla, but maybe it's because I don't know TypeScript well enough to see the benefit to start folding it in. But
yeah, I mean, like, for me, I've written programming. I've written software in many different programming languages. So a lot of those are typed, and what I tend to do is when I think of an idea or something, I tend to write out the types as a step one, and then a step two is I sort of scaffold the functions. So I write the type signatures of all the functions that I'm gonna write before I've even started writing the code. So for me, doing the types up front is a way of simplifying things, and you describe your interface, beforehand. And I've got used to writing code that way for, the last however many years. And so, but for me, it's like, I would be doing that even if I was writing JavaScript. I would write an example object, as a step one. What is my input? Defining that for documentation, for maintainability, for readability, for dealing with other developers. There are real benefits to it. It's maybe it's not everyone's cup of tea, but
right. Well, and so for you, it's almost like describing a process of you're almost building out the mental model beforehand, and then that helps you basically just be more efficient, not only when you're building it out, but also later on down the road when it comes to maintenance, right? And really helpful when working with other devs too.
But you always do this in all walks of life, right? You never go into the detail as a step one. You think, like, what's my high level strategy? How am I going to get from A to B? I'm going to take the train. Okay, how do I take the train? And then eventually you get to the low level stuff. So I think that's the way I think about programming anyway, is like, once you get into how do I write a for loop, right? And you're describing the how, and it gets very, very difficult. So it's much easier if you just take a step back, really. That's just my personal preference, though. Everyone has a different brain, and works in a different way.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of different brains, Taylor, do you want to go on to the next section here, which is what's happening in the Shopify space? Thank you, Sam. That was so awesome.
That was a super great transition, Carl. Well done.
Nice.
Love it.
Nice.
An insult and also the narrative choice. That's good.
So I'll go ahead and I'll share my screen. I'll try to roll through these because, per usual, thankfully we've got lots of fun stuff that we were able to talk about today. Can you all see my screen? Okay.
It's getting late, and Sam's got to go skiing in the Alps.
Yeah, he's got to go skiing.
Let's not keep him longer than necessary.
So, real big thing in the Shopify in the community section. Carl, I miss your soundboard. I admit, I made fun of you at first, but I miss it.
I'll bring it back.
So the collab requests have now become the default. And so there is a little bit of an outcry in the app dev community. John Speed, who has always really great insights on Shopify, had just posted a thread just talking about benefits, pros and cons, some feedback from other devs. Y'all can check it out. And basically just kind of responding to Glenn Coates' message, the kind of type thing. Before collab requests, unless the merchant goes in and turns it on, by default, literally anybody can pop open a store they can check out the My Shopify, and from your partner account, you can request access. And so this was not helpful for some stores who might be bigger, who are getting slammed with a bunch of collab requests. And so this was done as a way to prevent that from happening. Some folks aren't happy about it. So pros and cons, everybody's got some opinions on either side of the table, but a real interesting thread there. John's always got some really good insights. And then Toby also released in another follow-up. We've been talking about these DMCA takedown issues and stuff for, I feel like, a while now, mainly because it's a big issue in the space. So Shopify has changed how they are responding to this with a whole bunch of updates and how that goes. So just even from the get-go in the admin. So real helpful video. We'll link that up as well there. So I did have a thing here too, because Sam posted this poll. I wanted to make sure it went on in the community section too, about a public roadmap for Shopify apps. And so for people who are kind of interested in the feedback there, I think there's some good insights from other app devs too. In addition to Sam's got some good takes on that too. So I would recommend folks checking that out if they are building in the space. And so, is that y'all are moving forward?
I was gonna say, you kind of put him in a tough spot there, Taylor.
I think it was like more so that was the concern, right? Like the people in the poll were answering yay, but all the other app devs are like, don't do it. So I think there's just some interesting stuff there. So I thought that was pretty neat. But so yeah. And then I don't know if we want to go into the changelog. I know we're getting a little bit long here.
Pick your favorite one. Pick your favorite one.
Just one? Oh my gosh,
two.
This is
two,
hard.
Because you asked nice. Pick your favorite two.
Well, gosh, you're gonna make me choose. Okay, so as far as some fun stuff, there's some other stuff I'll link up in the show notes, and because Sam actually was hoping we'd have time to weigh in on some of these, some new webhook topics for discount events. I thought that was interesting. That's probably something that's been on y'all's radar. And then there was also a new modal API that was added to the latest version of AppBridge, where it's a replacement for the previous full screen API. So you've got basically a modal that you want to display as an overlay, prevents interaction with the rest of the app until it's dismissed. That has just been recently released as well. So something that was interesting. We'll make sure to include the other stuff in the show notes as well for you folks here, just so you're aware of the newest and greatest kind of type things that are available.
Newest today, not so new.
Newest today.
A month from now.
Well, not everybody's watching the changelog, too. So we want to make sure people are using the new stuff.
The webhook for discounts is a massive one. It's been missing for forever. So
yeah,
it's the one resource that never had that sort of webhook topic. So that's a big
which
deal.
you think that would be huge. It's whenever a discount has been created, updated, deleted. So that way you can make sure to keep stuff in sync.
For functions, this is a big deal as well. If you create discount functions, because you have no idea if discount's been deleted or deactivated. So it's not only it's the updating of them as well. And so what we've done, and what I'm sure many other apps have done, is build a synchronization system, which is always way more complicated than it should be.
Wow, yeah. So this is going to simplify things for you.
Oh,
huge.
Yeah. It builds half of the infrastructure, so that's good.
Nice.
Shopify
coming in clutch.
Yeah, and the B2Bs for discounts is also a big one. I think there's a lot of B2B DTC hybrid stores that wanted discounting and more powerful discounting, and they couldn't use it before. So lots of happy merchants there as well.
Nice.
Yeah, that'll be huge too. That was also in my changelog. Carl was making me cut it out, so I'm glad you snuck it in there. Bam!
I'm sorry. People have other things to do.
Move on to
breaks
the picks.
must be had. Yeah, pick of the week.
Yeah, I get it.
All right, Taylor, you go for. Well, I'll go first because you just talked.
I've been talking a bunch, man. Yeah, you go.
Just sitting here waiting for my. Here's my moment. All right, my pick of the week, and this is great because Sam's here and he's in the UK. There's a sketch comedy group called That Mitchell and Webb Look. It was popular, is probably still popular in Great Britain. That came out around 2006, I think. You could correct me on all this, Sam, because you obviously are in that culture. But I think their sketches are, on the whole, rather hilarious. And there's always some hits and misses. But if you like sketch comedy and enjoy some good British humor, check them out. They're on YouTube. Well, they're probably a more official place, but you can find some
this
clips
link
on YouTube.
video has over 2 million views.
I know,
so
it's pretty funny stuff.
That's crazy. Nice.
Yeah, I mean, it's these guys are the first people, if people come and move to the UK for university or whatever, I say, and they go, like, how do you teach British humor? It's like these guys are right up there,
That's awesome. I need to watch this now. I need to understand my UK friends better.
That's fine. How about you, Sam? What's your pick? We'll make Taylor go last.
Yeah, I'm last. So I didn't read this, so I didn't know I had to come up with something. But there is a cool project a friend of mine, Louis Pilford, is working on, and it's a new programming language called Gleam that brings types to the Erlang ecosystem. So the Beam virtual machine, which is really, really cool. And so check Louis out and Gleam out.
Is it Elixir typed?
It is, yes. Sorry, you're correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
But some people still want to use Erlang direct. I don't know enough about that space. I'm probably sounding stupid to people who do.
Elixir is dynamically typed, I believe. I'm not sure.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah.
I paid for a course on Elixir, and I've taken half of it, and it's been 4 years. I still get reminder emails every Saturday. Hey, you're 10% of the way through your course. You should finish. Sorry, Dave.
Although you like Ruby, right? So it's
well, that's why I looked into it, because a lot of it's like the elves in Middle Earth sail to the west. A lot of Ruby developers sail to Elixir, so I was kind of looking into that. See,
I think Louis was telling me the last time I spoke with him. There's a PhD student that's actually writing a Gleam to WebAssembly compiler, and so I was like, when that's ready, we'll migrate all of our Shopify functions over to Gleam, and so that will work. Yeah.
Ooh. Fancy.
So Taylor, since I didn't give you a chance to, you could pick a changelog for one of your picks of the week if you want. If you didn't get them all,
but I don't want to mix and match the sections too much. And Sam had my back; he snuck it in there, so it was all right.
Thank you, Sam.
But so my pick of the week is going to be, I got a bicycle trainer. So for those of you that aren't familiar with a bicycle trainer, it's basically a way that you can ride your bike indoors kind of type thing. So it's getting colder, and I need a way to do that because I don't want to be out running or biking in my local area when it's 10 degrees out. Yeah, it's super nice out today. I'm pretty jazzed about that.
But in general.
But so I need to get another tire for it. But Thomas Kelly from Archetype Themes thankfully recommended, because I was telling him about this, and he was like, you need to get a bit different back tire. But it is so loud. I got this because it was specifically like a relatively quiet one, so I could ride it just in my office, kind of type thing. But my office in my house is located underneath my daughter's room, and I got this in the mail from Amazon. I was super excited, and I hooked it all up, and I started to pedal on it because the kids had just gone to sleep. It was so loud. And then my daughter woke up and was like, what was that sound?
Oh, no.
And so I need to get a different tire for it, so it's a little bit quieter. But I'm excited to be able to be a little bit warm and not have to go somewhere to ride my bike. So bicycle trainer.
Amazing.
Bam.
Well, guys, this has been great. Sam, my mind, I was going to take notes, and at some point I just couldn't keep up with you. I said, I'm just going to have to listen to it again.
It's recorded.
Take notes afterwards.
Carl,
yeah, we recorded it. I did, didn't I? Oh, yeah, good. No, we recorded it. Good. We really appreciate you taking the time out, especially right before your big holiday. And hope you don't mind if we follow up with some more questions on Twitter or whatever, because there's so much there to explore, and you have so much knowledge. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Any questions, shoot me over. And thanks for hosting, and thanks for creating, Liquid Weekly podcast, because, we didn't have these sort of resources really in the ecosystem. So it's really, really fantastic to see all the other videos, all the big names in the ecosystem, and then little old
big
me.
Names. Now that Sam's here, we've got the big names.
Got the big names.
That's right.
Not what I meant. I don't. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Taylor. Enjoy your week too, and we'll catch you guys on the next one. Until then, stay liquid.
Stay liquid.
No, I don't know, whatever. We gotta come up with something. We need a tagline. All right. See you guys.
Stay liquid. Bye.